My name is Rocco Strangio, and I'm the host of the Law, AI, and Money podcast. I bring on attorneys, engineers, and entrepreneurs to unravel the world of AI and to discuss how it'll affect the legal profession. Today, I'm joined by Paul Kiesel, a partner at Kiesel Law. Paul is widely recognized as one of the top plaintiff attorneys, not just in California, but in the entire country. Paul has extensive experience in complex litigation matters ranging from environmental mass torts to defective drug and device cases. Paul has served as co-lead counsel on various mass torts, such as the Juul products liability cases. And his involvement in leadership teams has helped recover billions of dollars for plaintiffs around the country. Paul is also very involved in the legal community. He presents on CLEs, he serves on various boards and committees, and he's an active member of Speak Up for Justice, an organization aiming to protect the judiciary at a time of unprecedented threat and attack. In our conversation, Paul and I discuss his career and involvement in upcoming mass torts, such as the social media addiction litigation. We also discuss the role the judiciary plays on democracy and how threats against the judiciary threaten democracy as we know it. Lastly, we discuss the role technology plays on all this and whether it's the solution or if it's to blame. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm very well, Rocco. Thanks so much for letting me join you today.
No, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on. I got to say, having you on has been a huge privilege. I feel like I've had a lot of great attorneys on, but for you, both as an attorney and in your personal respects, what you're doing with your personal time and with your many affiliations and organizations that you're part of, it's really admiring. So thank you for coming on and being here. I want to talk about first, before we get into our discussion on Speak Up for Justice and protecting the judiciary, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into the field of law? What made you become an attorney?
So I wanted to be not just an attorney, but a personal injury trial lawyer since I was probably 8 years old. It was a friend of my family's who was a trial lawyer in New Jersey. And I just remembered I would sit and listen to these incredible stories of clients that he represented and the way he put their lives back on track by providing resources to them, an opportunity to either heal medically or pursue their lives financially. It was just such a fascinating practice that I wanted to be exactly that. And today, years later, I'm 65 now, 60 years later, I'm living that dream. Now, literally, this is what I was almost born to do and continue to do.
And you obviously started out as an associate, worked your way up to a partner at your previous firm, and now you have your own practice, Kiesel Law. You've been practicing for over 10 years, I believe now, with this firm.
Well, let's start with this. I've never left the firm. I'm in the exact same firm I started with in 1984. I started a block from my building. I can see my old office building that I practiced law on the top floor of that space. In 1984 is when I started clerking at that firm. I've never left.
So it's kind of morphed and become its own. Wow, that's unbelievable.
Right. So like tonight, I'm going to have my holiday party with 60 people at this holiday party. It's just crazy to think about. This little thing started, and now we've got this massive project we're doing together.
Yeah. So what type of law does Kiesel Law currently practice in?
I would say that the catastrophic personal injury world, whether it's products liability or motor vehicle or premises liability, are the cases I love most because I get to work with individual clients and really work for them personally. I love. Right. On the one hand, I have a fair number of mass claims across the country. I'm right now in trial in an environmental case where Kiesel Law represents 8,000 individual clients. 8,000 individual residents of a community that were impacted by hydrogen sulfide. And so we're literally right now in a 3-month trial in downtown Los Angeles. There's only, I use in air quotes, 18 of our clients are being presented to this jury as bellwether clients. but the outcome is going to be for a total of 13,750 clients across all the cases that have been filed. I love that work as well because I can use the technology that I've become very comfortable with and the resources to treat every one of those clients as individuals, even though there's in this case 8,000 of them. I represented thousands of individuals in the Juul e-cigarette litigation. So there's lots of mass actions that I've really enjoyed working with our clients on. And then we do a fair amount of class work, privacy work. My partner, Jeff Concius, is directly involved in those cases. And so we sort of have a wide spectrum of work that we do here at the firm.
Yeah, I'm very aware of that world. My company, Milestone, administers payments and settlement services in cases involving mass torts and large multi-party cases. And leveraging technology is how we do that. It's almost like bridging the gap between the individual PI world and the mass claims world, where you try and get as much touch points with the claimants as you can get utilizing technology. You're also involved in the social media litigation, is that correct?
It's true. I mean, we've got some pretty significant cases that we're working on. My firm is co-lead counsel of the social media cases that are the first time in my career that every single defendant is a California defendant. And what that matters for lawyers listening to this is typically if I were to file against a defendant in LA Superior Court, they're going to remove me to federal court because it's going to be a federalized claim. We're going to wind up with an MDL, multi-district litigation, and we'll be somewhere in America. But because the defendants reside in California, my clients from across the country, and I have hundreds of them, children who have social media mental health issues as a result of their engagement with social media, all those cases are here in Los Angeles as the coordinated proceeding is here in LA. So we're currently getting ready. Our trial, I believe, is January 1st, is the very first bellwether trial in America against Meta and the other social media defendants. We have $2 trillion in market capital on the other side of our litigation at the moment.
Unbelievable. And even more proof of how grateful I am for you taking the time to be here today. You're fighting those trials, but you made time to be on my podcast. I want to get into the main topic of this discussion, which is protecting our judiciary. We are at a time where our judiciary is being questioned when facts and reality are being dismissed. And you have an organization that you're a part of, Speak Up for Justice, that is helping to combat that. Can you talk a little bit about Speak Up for Justice, what it is, why you got involved?
So the reason why we have the term Speak Up for Justice is that in the spring of last year, 2020, law firms in this country were being attacked as Perkins Coie had a fatwa, as an executive order, so to speak, was issued against that law firm because the administration didn't like what it did. Trump started to go after law firms first. Before he went after the judges, he went after the law firms. And nobody was speaking up. Nobody was saying, well, wait a minute. You can't issue an executive order against a law firm because you don't like the clients they represent. That's our role, is to represent clients, individuals, corporations. You may not love what they do, but they have the right to legal representation. And nobody was speaking up for the law firms. Very few were doing that. And it was March of last year, and I realized something needs to be done. And then the attacks started happening on the court. Then Camille Abrigo Garcia was deported to El Salvador. Despite a federal court order not to remove him, he was removed. And then the administration started going after the judges directly and criticizing the courts and using very, I'm going to say, dangerous words to describe judges. In fact, just yesterday, Camille Abrigo Garcia, Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, Tricia McLaughlin, who is with the Justice Department, she described when that judge yesterday, a trial court judge, announced that Camille Abrigo Garcia should be released from custody. She said This Obama appointed judge is engaged in naked judicial activism. So those are very powerful words to issue against a federal judicial officer. And so bottom line is, I realize somebody needs to speak up for the courts. Someone needs to defend the courts because the courts can't defend themselves. They're not permitted to defend themselves. Judges can't get up there and justify why they issued decisions. They speak in the written word, but that's the extent of it. And so I felt it was important to begin to get the country together to appreciate the guardrails we have in this nation are the legislative body, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And when we lose our guardrails, we are at risk of losing our democracy. And so, Rocco, the reason why I did this is I wanted to get the word out that our democracy is at risk if we don't all come together and support our judges, our judicial system, and our legal counsel. So that was sort of the genesis of how it started. And I've been privileged to have some extraordinary speakers over the last 6 months who've engaged in this dialogue. All of it is online at Speak Up for Justice. So if you simply type in Speak Up for Justice, you'll get to the website. And I've got everything from a program we did this summer with former retired Justice Anthony Kennedy. And Justice Kennedy is a remarkable judicial officer, still engaged in law today. And I had judges from Venezuela, from Poland, and from South Africa discussing sort of the international perspective on the rule of law and how when the rule of law begins to crumble, as it did in Venezuela, as it tried to do in South Africa, and as it rebuilt in South Africa. Did I say South Africa twice? As it did in Poland. No. First I've got Venezuela. It failed in Venezuela. It came close to failing in Poland, and it's still at risk in Poland to the rule of law. And what happened and how it reemerged in South Africa, that conversation with Justice Kennedy engaged in it is one of our more powerful programs. And then, I'll stop. I had first time ever, 5 sitting district court judges, federal judges, talking about threats on their lives and their families' lives because of the bombastic words that have been spoken, the challenges to their decisions have imposed extraordinary risk to them individually.
Well, that's how I became kind of brought into this world. I had seen it in the news and I knew about it, but I didn't know the extent of it on a personal level with a lot of these judges. You hosted a panel discussion at TLMT, which is a conference that we went to in Cabo, and it's a great conference for anybody who is interested in going. But those judges provided real world examples of some of the threats, some of the voicemails they're receiving, some of the scare tactics they're receiving as a part of these attacks that our administration and people in power currently have been making against these judges because they don't like their rulings.
Correct. In fact, if you wanted to, you can edit from my online videos. You can play the incredible voicemail that was received by one of these judges threatening his life, saying he should be assassinated because someone disagreed with his decision.
And it doesn't do it justice to just talk about it. I think people really need to see those voicemails, listen to them firsthand to understand the rage and the passion that some of these dissenters, quote unquote dissenters, they're not dissenters because
let me say what I did before. I'm going to repeat this earlier because I got this wrong. With regard to the decision involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia, it was Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security Tricia McLaughlin described the judge's decision yesterday as, quote, naked judicial activism by an Obama-appointed judge. And I can't tell you how wrong that statement is at every level, but that's exactly what came out of her mouth yesterday.
But it's funny because whenever it's a dissenting judge that was not appointed by, let's say, somebody from the other side of the spectrum, there's still an issue with it. They still find some
100%.
way to describe it as activism.
Correct. Yep.
So can we explain how accurate, I know you talked a little bit about this in Cabo, how much can we trust our judicial rulings? How accurate are judges when it comes to juries and appeals?
Well, look,
Where do we stand on
let
that?
me say this. And Venezuela is an interesting place to start because Venezuela was a democracy much like the United States. They had a legislative branch, they had an executive branch, and they had a judicial branch. They were a democracy. They were the wealthiest nation in South America, in part because they have one of the largest oil reserves in the world in Venezuela. And when Maduro was, I think it was Maduro, was elected president, he began to take apart the judiciary and he hand-picked the Supreme Court justices who were overseeing the judicial decisions that were happening in Venezuela. And so what happened in Venezuela was their democracy fell apart, not because there were tanks in the street, but because individuals wearing black robes took away the democracy. It was in fact the Supreme Court that granted to the president the authority to do precisely what he did to take down their democracy. I see that as a cautionary note. I have tremendous confidence in our judicial officers. I have a firm belief that we as a country survive in many ways because we have a rule of law, because nations around the globe look to the United States as a beacon, as a place where disputes can be resolved neutrally and fairly and confidently. But if in fact the Supreme Court shifts the power balance and begins to provide unbridled authority of a unitary president who can hire and fire at will, who can agree or disagree with judicial determinations that he likes or doesn't like, we are at a tipping point. And so while I have full confidence in our judicial system and stare decisis is so critical to us, there's a chance that it begins to come apart if at the highest levels we lose credibility of our decisions.
I wanted to ask you, how can we move forward at a time when facts and reality are constantly being dismissed?
It's a great question. And the challenge we have is, since you have artificial intelligence that can create videos and tell stories which may not be accurate, and people get their news sources no longer from the traditional trusted media, whether it's the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, you're getting your news from influencers. And it's a great question. How do we have the credibility to trust the information that we're receiving and not live within an echo chamber? The whole purpose of Speak Up for Justice is to create a non-partisan, non-political discussion point, which I think is important, is people have to get their information from places that they trust. And I'm hoping that, for example, Speak Up for Justice is someplace someone could be trusting in the words that are communicated, because it's not just a single point of view. In fact, this coming Monday, we're going to have 4 former Department of Justice U.S. attorneys. We're going to have Governor Chris Christie, who's the governor of New Jersey, but he was also Department of Justice U.S. attorney appointed, I believe, by George Bush. You're going to have Steve McAllister, who was a Republican U.S. attorney from, I believe, Kansas, that was appointed by, I think Trump won. And then you're going to have Liz Oyer, who was a Biden appointed. She was the pardon Department of Justice lawyer who was fired by Trump because she wouldn't agree in the pardon she granted to Mel Gibson, I believe, the right to get a gun permit back. And when she wouldn't do that, he fired her. And she'll be one of our speakers on Monday's program. And finally, Barahara, who is himself a podcaster and was the former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, which is the kind of preeminent position in the country. That's a bipartisan group appointed by both sides, discussing the rule of law and not the politics.
Right. It seems like there's so many, and I hope there's more, Paul. I hope you have more people, past Supreme Court justices, past federal district court judges or circuit court judges behind this, because this, as you mentioned before, is so important to our democratic fabric in this country and the ability for our country moving forward to function. The last question I have for you is, what is tech's role in all of this? How can we leverage technology to improve this phenomenon? Or rather, is tech's role in all this a negative influence? Is tech to blame for this movement and direction?
I would never say that tech is to blame for it, because this is called progress. But there's no doubt that with progress requires guardrails. And so, we've all seen science fiction where the robots and the computers take over and we lose the human interaction we have with the world around us. And so I fear, of course, that if we put too much trust in the machines, that we run the risk of becoming irrelevant when they become sentient and can make decisions. What's great about courts is the courts are elastic. They look at the past to figure out where we're going to go in the future. Stare decisis is important because it provides trust in the decision-making process, because you can look to the past to know what's going to happen in the future on the one hand. And on the other, the uniqueness of having individual judges or panels make decisions allows for some flexibility. There's opportunity to make changes because humans are involved in that process. And I fear that taking the human process out by getting rid of the lawyers and having AI make decisions for you, we lose the flexibility that we have as humans to use our own independent judgment to make decisions. So that's the real fear I have, is we lose the independence by relying on machines to provide our answers.
I agree. I think, and it's tough to admit, it's almost the direction we're going for the neutrality as well that technology might have that humans don't. We might look back and say, wow, we trusted people and their inherent biases and emotions and greed to make decisions on behalf of everybody. And hopefully technology is the solution for that. But again, like you said, that takes dependence and reliance a little bit. Paul, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. Your voice is just as important as your ideas. Is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think I got it all. If anything you need and follow up, happy to do it. And I'm really glad to have a chance to chat with you and get ready for the holidays, which for me begins on Monday. And looking forward to the 2026 to come, Rocco.
Yes, and I'll be tuning into your next Speak Up for Justice discussion. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Law, AI, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to like and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you.